All right. So again, welcome everybody to today's Lunch and Learn. I just hit the record button just to make everybody aware of it. So this is because we do get a fair number of folks who end up watching this at some point in the future. They couldn't make it for this specific time. They miss out on being able to ask questions at the end, but we post this on Kenwood's website after this is over. So that's why we record it. I want to welcome Mary Campbell. Mary is a terrific HR attorney with Shulman Rogers. She's our guest speaker and has a lot of good experience and a lot of good things to say about kind of what I think is a very timely topic, which is returning to work and what employers need to think about and consider in this time period as people are starting to return to work and figuring out what they can ask employees, whether they can require people to get vaccines or prove that they've gotten vaccines. So I think it's kind of a very timely topic. So I am pleased that she is here. Mary will talk about this topic. She's got some slides. I'm going to actually give her the controls here in a second. So she will operate everything. I think her presentation will run around 40 minutes, and then we'll have some question and answers afterwards. If you have a question kind of during the presentation, I'd suggest just putting that in the chat box, and Mary will monitor that as we're going through the presentation, and then also answer questions at the end. So with that, I am going to turn controls over to her.
All right. Nice to meet everyone. Sorry I had to stand up like that. All of a sudden I got very dark, so I changed the windows to see if maybe I could get some more light on. Hopefully you can see me. Very nice to meet all of you. When Bill asked me to give this presentation today, I was like, of course. As he mentioned, I'm an employment lawyer. I actually just got off a call with a client earlier today who was just like, about how much time are you talking about vaccines? A lot. Everybody has questions about vaccines. I think for, everyone on this phone who's either a business owner or an HR professional, this is probably one of the hardest periods of our, career, right? Between COVID, the leave issues with FFCRA, the change in the administration, and then you add on to that Black Lives Matter, the anti-Asian violence, and the Me Too movement. And we're a little busy with some personnel matters, but hopefully this presentation can give you some answers on these vaccine questions, the common questions that tend to come up. As Bill mentioned, I'm happy to take questions as we go, and we'll see if we can make everyone feel a little bit better about knowing how to proceed. So with that, I'm going to go ahead. I have to thematically share my screen and then I'll start the presentation. So bear with me for just 1 second. Does everybody see the presentation? All right.
Yes.
All right. So a little legalese first. Obviously, this is not legal advice. This is just my best practices and tips. I am a practicing lawyer, so if anyone does want some specialized tailored advice, I'm always happy to get to learn a little bit more about your company and see if we can help. About our firm, we are a full practice law firm in the Potomac area. So we work with businesses in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area, and we basically handle just about any type of legal need. So even if your questions aren't employment related, if you ever need help, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to connect you with either me or someone who can. So what are we going to talk about today? First of all, we made it. I know, welcome back. This has been some rough going. As I mentioned, I think this is some of the most challenging HR times that, professionals have had to go through. But I do feel like hope is around the corner. Many of us have already started the vaccination process. I don't think we're the same. Society has changed, but we did make it. What we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the vaccines, return to work, what you need to be considering in return to work. And I'm going to throw in a few polls as we go through. They're not set up in the Zoom, so I'm going to ask if people feel comfortable just put your, there's not a big group here, so we can just yell. You guys can come off mute if you're on mute and just yell out your answers. These are not challenging. They're just intended to be a little bit fun. So we're also going to be talking about the leaves, the various leave obligations between the brand new paid leave, sick and safe leave, FFCRA leave, Cobra. There's been a lot of changes to Cobra that we need to stay on top of. Unionization efforts. If anyone's following the news with Amazon, that fight's actually not over, despite what the media has been kind of portraying. But that really actually has a lot of impacts for all businesses, these issues. Travel, and some closing thoughts. So, talking about vaccines. First of all, can you mandate? And the answer to that question is right now, as of today, yes, you can mandate as a general rule. There might be a couple of nuanced situations, but as a general rule, employers can mandate that their employees get vaccinated. There are some exceptions on the individual basis. So if you have a policy that says you must mandate, you have to provide for accommodations for those who have a disability, pregnancy, or sincere religious belief. If you find yourself in that situation, I do recommend, if you're not comfortable working through the interactive process, that you reach out to your legal counsel, because there's just some steps you need to take. But if you're going to mandate, right now the EEOC has a little bit lessened its rules on mandating these types of things. And the main thing that they're looking at is whether or not there's a danger to self or others. And most businesses are going to satisfy that test. We want people in the office, and to keep everybody safe, we need to require that people be vaccinated. If you do mandate a vaccine, you should consider providing paid leave. There are some federal laws that provide for that. We're going to talk about the FFCRA in a minute. But beyond that, there are states that are beginning to require paid leave for vaccines, and not Maryland. But in addition, the CDC is strongly encouraging that employers who mandate or even encourage consider allowing employees to use their accrued paid leave or providing additional paid leave for time to take the vaccine. Although you can mandate, the best practice for most employers, and what I've encouraged, for example, my own workplace to do, is instead simply encourage, strongly incentivize. So what does that mean? First of all, you can offer rewards as long as they're de minimis. What does that mean? A gift card, $20, something like that. A t-shirt, a small incentive would be fine. Providing that paid leave that I just mentioned would be incentive that is permissible to encourage vaccines. Other things that the government is suggesting is the CDC talks about a vaccine champion, which is basically a leader or a group of leaders in your organization who, share information. I got my first shot. I got my second shot. Here's what I experienced. Now I get to go into maybe it's not so fun to go into meetings. I get to go for a walk with no mask. Here's the benefit. Here's how my life has improved because I'm now vaccinated. What the social scientists are telling us is seeing people you honor and respect go through this process and trust in that system encourages other people who are vaccine hesitant, to share that same trust. We're going to talk about whether you can request information about vaccines. The most important piece, and we'll go into this in more detail, but the most important piece is you can ask if someone has been vaccinated. You can even ask for a copy of that little white card, as long as you treat it as a medical record in your personnel file. Remember, medical records are supposed to be kept separately from personnel records. I don't think you need a copy of the white card. Some employers might find that that's helpful, but for the vast majority of my clients, the honor system seems to be working. Let me know if you've been vaccinated and just keep a record of that. Some clients are actually doing the vaccine themselves. In the before times, you might have brought in someone to do a flu vaccine right in the conference room, something similar to that. That's still a third party doing the vaccine. So that's probably fine. Doing it, if you are a medical provider, you can actually, if you're, we have a lot of biotech clients and medical clients who are actually doing the vaccines themselves. Just be careful about what information you're collecting. Whether you're doing it, you're bringing in a third party. I don't know that there's a lot of clients with enough clout around here to actually bring in someone to do the vaccine these days. But certainly in the future, that's going to be a real possibility. Or if you're telling people to just go get vaccinated at CVS or any of the state-run sites, you just want to be careful about what medical information you're collecting. And that's why I said I wouldn't bother with getting the card unless you really need it. The card does not have any protected medical information beyond what you're allowed to collect. So if you wanted to collect the cards, copies of the cards, that's okay. But you don't want to ask someone what symptoms they experienced. Like it's fine in friendly conversation. You don't want to document what symptoms, health symptoms people are experiencing. And more importantly, if someone says, no, I haven't gotten the vaccine, you don't necessarily want to document, any health reasons why outside of a request for accommodation. You treat that health information the same as any other health information you're collecting. I'm gonna pause here because I did see in the chat, what if the client wants to see the card before having a meeting? So if you're working with a third party and the third party says, I want to meet with your people, but I only want to meet with your people if you can show me that they're vaccinated. I don't think I would agree to show a third party my employees' cards. I would feel comfortable saying, I've confirmed that everyone you're going to be meeting with today has completed the vaccine process. You're going to have a little trust and faith with us, but I've confirmed that everybody has completed the vaccine process. Some of you might have heard of vaccine passport. That is a concept that is still in the works, and we're trying to figure out if that's actually going to work. But a vaccine passport is similar to that idea. I want to see the card. It's like a government stamp of approval. They think it's going to be digital, that someone actually has been vaccinated. In the future, if vaccine passports are developed, that might be something that you'd be able to demonstrate. But primarily because I'm worried about medical information and people's privacy, I don't think I would share the white card. It also has people's birth date and other personal information. I don't think I would agree to share that white card with anyone. Oh, the duty to accommodate. So what if they refuse? So as I mentioned, if you are requiring a vaccine, religion, disability, pregnancy are all viable reasons for an accommodation. It's actually pretty complicated about what to do if someone is refusing to get a vaccine. First of all, you have to consider whether or not you're mandating or encouraging. But even if you're simply encouraging, if someone says no, you can inquire, is it not yet? Right? I'm working on it. I haven't gotten it scheduled. Is it, I'm not sure, vaccine hesitancy, or is it no? I was working with a client yesterday who had employees who said, a handful of employees said that it was their constitutional right not to get a vaccine. What do you do in that situation? And that you really should be talking to your legal counsel on, because there is some nuance here, but the general rule is figure out whether or not the employee can perform the essential functions of the job not being at work. So you can say everybody in my building everybody in my office has to be vaccinated. If you're not vaccinated, you can continue to work for me, but you have to work from home. And then you have to think about, well, if you're working from home, are you doing the entire job or 80% of the job? Like, are you able to actually do the job from home? Is there some element of the collaborative give and take of working in the office that's missing because you're working from home? Is there a performance issue because you're working from home? Start thinking about your write-ups in that way too. It is okay that during the pandemic, you are not dinging anyone for poor performance from working from home, but noting you're doing a great job given the limitations of the pandemic. But, in the before times when we were in the office, you were able to, process 15 and now you're only doing 7. Note these things. Everything is great except, I think you would benefit from more collaboration. Don't just think it, put it in your performance reviews, because if in the future the employee refuses to get the vaccine and you want to take some personnel action, if you're saying not that the employee cannot continue to work remotely, but the performance reviews are, you're doing a brilliant job working remotely, and there's no mention of the things that are missing, you might find yourself in some trouble. It might be more difficult to require that employee actually come back into the office. In terms of screening, you want to stick to the CDC symptoms. I apologize. I do the list of the CDC symptoms. If anybody is looking for it, you just Google CDC. It is an interesting list. It includes everything from nausea and diarrhea. It includes headaches. It includes congestion. It is all like by the time you're done going through those CDC symptoms, every one of us is worried about having COVID because the symptoms are so broad. So you can't ask for anything that's beyond the CDC symptoms. But by the same token, if people are truly honestly answering those CDC questions, almost everyone's going to say yes. The message here from a legal standpoint is that EEOC and DOL has said you can inquire into medical symptoms. However, those medical symptoms have to stick to what the CDC has identified as related to COVID. You are walking a very fine line with concerns about HIPAA, that's the Health Privacy Act, personal privacy issues, and keeping everybody safe. So while I have had clients who have looked to do like app related screenings or more in-depth screenings, taking the temperature is always fine. In a pandemic, before the pandemic, you couldn't do that. So all these rules are very much in flux, but right now taking the temperature is okay. Asking the general CDC identified symptoms is fine.
Mary, can I ask you a question kind of
Sure.
related to that? As opposed to symptoms from COVID itself, how do you feel about, because some people are having side effects from the vaccine and in some cases needing to take sick time off because of just those side effects. Does that fall under the FCCRA, whatever the initials are?
Right,
Or,
alphabet soup, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so that's an important distinction. So in terms of screening, can you come into the office? You wouldn't necessarily ask, is your arm sore, right? You might ask, do you have a fever, which is a symptom of both COVID and having received the vaccine. But you wouldn't ask for screening purposes, you wouldn't ask about symptoms solely related to whether or not, to the vaccine experience. However, that FFCRA that Bill was alluding to, that was just expanded. I'm going to walk you through it in a couple of slides, but that was just expanded to say that if you have chosen, because it's now voluntary, if you have chosen to offer FFCRA to your employees, one of the justifications for that paid leave is vaccine related symptoms and the time to go get the vaccine. So I think that that was the long answer. The short answer, Bill, is I wouldn't screen for vaccine related, only symptoms. But if someone says they can't come to work, because of a vaccine symptom, then you need to take that into consideration.
Okay.
All right, return to work and quarantine. Everybody knows, hopefully, but just to make sure we're on the same page, if you have someone who comes into the office and then tells you that they tested positive, you are supposed to, we're going to walk through this, but you're supposed to find out who they've had close contact with and then send everyone home who's been exposed. That was the current guidance is 14 days. If the individuals that experienced close and sustained contact with a COVID positive person have been fully vaccinated, which is either one shot plus the waiting period or two shots plus the waiting period, depending on which vaccine. If those individuals are fully vaccinated, there is now, the CDC guidance is there is no need to quarantine and there's no need to test. So even if they have been exposed to someone who is COVID positive, you don't have to send them home. However, you should still identify to them what happened and advise them if they are developing symptoms, the same rules apply. You go home for 14 days. If you actually develop COVID, then you have to get clearance from a doctor to come back or wait out until 10 days post symptoms. If you work in a high density place, which I don't think many of the people on this call do, but if you're working in a high density workplace like a factory, even if you're fully vaccinated, the CDC is still recommending testing. What is close contact, just to make sure everybody's still on the same page? 6 feet, 30 minutes in a cumulative 48-hour period. That 30 minutes in a cumulative 48-hour period means if someone walked by you in the hall 5 times, that might be 30 minutes. It's not 30 minutes in a block. Close contact is also direct physical contact, shared eating or drink utensils, or they sneeze or cough on you. Everybody kind of looks at that one and says, well, who's, Matt? And then I say, well, but I've got daycares and, these kids are not always remembering to sneeze and cough into the mask. Liability, right? What's everybody worried about? The liability. So first thing to think about is workers' compensation. If you have an employee who gets COVID and says, I wouldn't have gotten COVID but for coming to work, for the most part, that's still very difficult to prove where you got COVID. The states are figuring out how to deal with this workers' comp issue. There are some competing bills in the local legislatures. For now, at least in Maryland, workers' comp claim would be compensable if the claimant can show work exposure. Again, that is going to be very difficult for most of our white collar workplaces. If you're working in a medical or nursing home facility, that makes some sense. If you are following the appropriate protocol so that if someone tests positive, you send them home, you send those who have been exposed, unless they've been fully vaccinated, home, it would be difficult to prove, to demonstrate that they got COVID through exposure at work, unless they're like the third or fourth person to get COVID at your workplace, right? If there is a breakout, that's different than the first person who got COVID at work. Make sure you show your work, right? A lot of this is going to be about preventative measures that you've implemented. Wear your mask, do your enforce social distancing, still have that antibacterial everywhere. Consider limiting capacity, quarantine as appropriate, right? Don't stop going through that procedure of checking in. Although the vaccinated people can stay at work, that doesn't mean you still shouldn't follow the steps. Be aware of HIPAA. We're getting more and more people who are getting comfortable sharing that they tested positive. But remember, you as the business owner, as the HR professional, cannot share the name of the individual who tested positive unless they on their own volunteered that you can do so. You're not even supposed to ask them, hey, is it okay if I share this? There are obviously people who say, no problem, you can share it with me. A lot of times it's pretty easy to figure it out, right? But the bottom line is you don't have the right to share someone's private medical information, and that would include a positive COVID test. Some of my clients are using liability waivers. For employees, I'm not sure how helpful or useful or enforceable they're going to be at all, but some people just do feel more comfortable using these liability waivers. They just haven't been tested, right? We're still like the courts are backlogged. Nobody knows if they're actually going to work. But for employees, it's a little, I would focus more on the preventative measures. If you are a business that invites third-party customers onto your workplace, that might be something you would consider, if that is something. I worked with salons and other places where customers have to come on site. And you might want to think about these liability waivers. Just keep in mind that anyone who guarantees you that they are going to work doesn't know what they're talking about. We think it's really more about making sure everybody understands the risk. So for the quarantine, I think I mentioned this before, CDC guidance is still recommended to be 14 days. It can be 10 days if you've had symptoms. So if you have symptoms, it's 10 days from the end of the symptoms. Or if you've been exposed and you get a negative test result, you only have to wait 7 more days and then you can come back. However, the test is supposed to be 5 days after the exposure, so that is pretty close to 14 days. But if you're looking for ways to shorten that period, that's another thing you can consider. Other things you need to consider are OSHA. That's the agency that governs safety in the workplace. The federal government does not require a written response plan as of today, but they've issued this thing called the National Emphasis Program. It's focused on high-risk workers. So again, that's high-density workplaces. Obviously, OSHA has authority to come into any workplace, but they're going to be a little overwhelmed right now. So, I'm not super worried about OSHA for my office-based clients right now, but obviously you still have that obligation to comply with all of the OSHA requirements. The big thing from OSHA also is protections against retaliation. If an employee, a customer, someone you interact with raises a complaint about safety issues, you can't retaliate against them for speaking up. In terms of local area requirements, Maryland does not have a requirement right now, but if you have offices in either DC or VA, Virginia, DC, there's no written requirement, but they encourage a written plan, and you are required to adopt social distancing and other worker protection policies, which hopefully you're already doing. Virginia does require a written risk assessment. If you're a very high or high risk workplace, then the requirements are more onerous. You have to have plans and trainings that are in writing. If you're a medium risk with more than 10 employees, then you still have to develop a plan and provide training. Most white collar office space employers are going to be considered lower risk. And so that is just more akin to what we're experiencing across the country. If 2 or more employees are diagnosed within 14 days, that's basically the equivalent of an outbreak at work, and you need to notify the state. What if someone refuses to return to work? First of all, permanent telework. We talked about this a little bit. I alluded to it in the beginning of the presentation. There is an intersection with the federal ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, but also state and local disability laws. And it's really going to depend on whether the employee wants to would like to get vaccinated but has a disability, or just is uncomfortable getting vaccinated. And the discomfort could even lead to a mental health condition, severe anxiety that is a disability. That's why I said, this is very nuanced and complicated. And so I, would certainly suggest, at least on the first go around, that you get some help before you just kind of tackle this one, because there are a lot of layers and it is complicated. That's also why you need to be thinking about whether permanent telework is okay with you. Right. So you might decide, we are reopening our office and we don't really care if employees come back. Anyone who wants to telework can telework. You might say, we're reopening our office and we're encouraging everyone to come back, and you can only not come back if you qualify for an accommodation. And that's where that advice I gave you before, make sure you're communicating to your employees why return to work is part of the job. That's that collaborative nature, or deficiencies in performance that are, understandable given the pandemic, but can be improved, resolved by returning to work. School and childcare is still an issue. I don't know if anyone else on the call has young kids, but I have a 10 and 12-year-old. They're around all the time. I've sent both of mine back to school. Back to school these days means 4 days a week, every other week, right? That is childcare issues for a lot of your employees. So the FFCRA, that we're going to go into all the different requirements, it still exists, but now it's voluntary. If the school is closed, your employee might qualify for that leave. If the school is open and the employee has elected not to send their child to school, that is not going to qualify for FFCRA. We're coming up on summertime. There are camps. I just have not found, I've not found any good guidance on this, because a lot of the camps are reopening. I think it is going to be very difficult for an employee to say there is no camp option for my children. It might be that employee's particular first choice camp isn't open, but other camps are going to be open. Other daycare and care providers are going to be open. So if you have an employee, even if you elect to offer this FFCRA leave, if you have an employee who says, I need to be out for 14 weeks, which is the max under FFCRA, because of childcare issues, again, I would strongly encourage you talk to your legal professional, because I'm struggling to see how anyone's going to qualify for that FFCRA leave these days. Not the sick part of it, the care for kids, because school's closed, because a lot of these things are opening. In terms of unemployment, you want to focus on what I call Biden 1, which is the brand new American Rescue Plan. That's the ARPA. If you see that written up anywhere, that is offering an additional $300 a week through 9/6/21. An additional $300 a week in addition to whatever the state benefit is. There is also a change for employees that the first $10,200 in unemployment benefits is now going to be tax-free in 2020, as long as the household is making less than 150 grand a year. So to the extent you are fielding questions from your former employees who have applied for unemployment, there are some benefits in that new, what I call Biden 1 ARPA unemployment guidance. I've mentioned this many times, this FFCRA. I think it's just helpful to kind of walk through the history so we can see where things have changed. So FFCRA, the first version of it, I call Trump 1. That was mandatory, anyone with fewer than 500 employees, and it's fully paid for by the government. That part remains true, or it's still in place, fully paid for by the government. Under the first version, Trump 1, it was 10 days of sick. It was full pay up to $511 a day if the employee, him or herself, was sick or quarantining, and 2/3 pay up to $200 a day if the employee needed the leave to care for others. Under Trump 1, there was an additional 10 weeks of family leave. That's that leave that it was solely for if a minor child is home because school or daycare is closed. That was 2/3 pay up to $200 a day. The family leave was really 12 weeks under Trump 1. The first 2 weeks were supposed to be unpaid, and then they got access to the 10 weeks of family leave. However, that first 2 weeks that were unpaid, employees were allowed to either use the sick leave bucket, remember the 10 days, which is 2 weeks, or other accrued leave. So people kind of got it stuck in their head, that it was 12 weeks of family, but it was a little bit more nuanced than that. The second iteration of the FFCRA was also under Trump. I refer to it as Trump 2. That made it no longer mandatory, it became a voluntary program. So through March, just a couple weeks ago, it was a voluntary program. Everything else remained the same. Then the Biden administration came in. So we are now operating, and this is the current law, Biden 1. It is still voluntary. It is still for employees with fewer than 500 people. The Biden 1 is going to go through September 20th, 2021. The big changes, first of all, there's a new sick leave bank on April 1. So anyone who previously used leave is entitled to a new bank, and the rollover date was 4/1. They get to use that sick leave for the original 6 reasons. Remember, if you were sick, if you're caring for someone who's sick, if you've been told to quarantine, there was that poster that everybody should have up in their office. They get the original 6 reasons, plus Biden 1 expanded it so that you can use your sick leave, your FFCRA sick leave, if you're getting a vaccine or you're dealing with a vaccine reaction. There's another big change under Biden 1, and that is that additional 10 to 12 weeks, depending on how you're thinking about it, of the family leave bucket, which used to be just for care for minor children because school was closed, has been expanded so that all the sick leave reasons can now qualify for family leave. In addition, that nuance between the 10 weeks plus 2 weeks of unpaid is gone, so that now the family leave, all of it is entitled to reimbursement. So if you offer the FFCRA family leave bucket, it's an additional, it's the full 12 weeks. plus the 2 weeks of sick. So it's really now 14 weeks of paid leave that are available. At all those limitations, right? It's only full pay for 2 weeks if you yourself are sick. After that, it is 2/3 if you're caring for someone else or any of the other justifying reasons. The family leave credit was expanded to a total of $12,000 per employee. If anyone has not yet used FFCRA, it is an immediate reimbursement. So the idea is that it's a credit against your payroll taxes. So if you have an employee, if you've decided to offer this leave, you have an employee who qualifies, you pay them and you get a discount off your payroll taxes, so you don't send out that money to the government. We're still waiting for more updated FAQs. We expect to get some more. The guidance I'm giving most of my clients is well, it's up to you whether you want to offer this. It is entirely voluntary. It's also, you could offer just the sick leave and not the family leave. And a lot of clients are thinking about doing that. So it would just be 2 weeks of leave. Remember, if you do decide to offer the family leave, it's really a question of whether you can afford to have someone gone for that long of a period of time. Really, the only way I think people are really going to use the full 14 weeks is if they're sick, because most of the daycare and schools are open. You can still use the school leave on a hybrid basis, right? So I described that my school is every other week and not on Wednesdays. Those days would still be entitled to FFCRA leave, but anyone who can go to a full-time program would not be entitled to FFCRA leave, and camps, again, might be 5 days a week. Also consider sick leave obligations, allowing your employees to use vacation. Lots of state and local entities are requiring sick leave. So if you're in Montgomery County, which I think a lot of you are, there's Maryland sick and safe leave obligations. There's also Montgomery County sick and safe leave obligations. And anyone who is actually sick or has a family member who's sick would qualify for that too. If someone is unable to work at all or return to work, and because they are worried about COVID, it's probably important, it's probably necessary to go through that interactive process and figure out whether it is just a generalized fear or a diagnosed mental condition. If someone is worried and has anxiety that is medically treated, that might be a disability that requires the interactive process and potentially a reasonable accommodation. My primary message to you is, don't just say no. Think about it, go through that process. Don't have your automatic reaction be no. Cobra. So ARPA also provided for emergency Cobra relief. If you have more than 20 employees, you're governed by federal Cobra, but there's also a Maryland mini Cobra. And the subsidies do apply to the Maryland mini Cobra. So under ARPA, there is Cobra relief through September 30th, 2021. It's 100% subsidy. It's again a payroll credit through your Medicare payroll taxes. The complicated things with this Cobra subsidy is you might already have employees who left your employment. You only qualify if the employer involuntarily reduced your hours or terminated your employment. But if the former employee qualified, they might not have elected Cobra because they couldn't afford it. They have to be given notice because now they are entitled to elect it with this subsidy, even if they have been gone for some period of time. So there's a second chance election obligation. And you have to obviously let them know that they are no longer eligible for the subsidy if they get a new job and they're eligible for healthcare or they go on a Medicare health plan. There is a notice obligation for employers. DOL just last week did issue the notices. You can just print them off the form. If you have fewer than 20 employees and you're governed by the Maryland mini Cobra, the subsidies are still there. There are alternative notices that DOL has put together. You just want to make sure you're providing the notice, putting the poster up. You work with your Cobra administrator if you have one, or make sure that if you have employees that are entitled to that second chance election, that they know about it, and anyone new that is involuntarily terminated or their hours are reduced gets the appropriate notice on Cobra. Unions. So union activity, it is picking up, and primarily that's because a lot of employees have concerns about the terms and conditions of employment. That's what the union law is about. So even if you do not have a union in your workplace, anytime your employees are engaged in what's called concerted activity, to discuss the terms and conditions of employment, the National Labor Relations Act does apply. What's concerted activity? If the employee is saying, I'm not being treated fairly, that's not concerted. But as soon as they say, we're not being treated fairly, or words to that effect, it's concerted activity, and the National Labor Relations Act could apply. Unions are focused on minimum wage, health and safety, and job protection. And I don't know about you all, but that seems to be on the minds of a lot of local employees, employers, the news. So there's just a lot of union related activity going on. And you can obviously ask Amazon how that's going. If you followed that, there was a huge campaign for a southern facility. The initial election, Amazon defeated the union, but that is far from the end of the story. They are challenging a lot of the ballots. There is additional litigation, and it took Amazon gazillions of dollars to fight this union campaign. Most of my clients don't have gazillions of dollars to spend on a union campaign, and union campaigns without that kind of approach are actually really difficult to defeat. The default is it's really hard to defeat a union campaign. So if you have employees that are starting to talk about the terms and conditions of employment, or if you get any communication from a union, please, please, please reach out to your legal counsel, because the rules on unions are just different than whatever your basic practical sense of how the world should work. Flip it on its head, and that's what the rules in the union context. They're just complicated and not at all straightforward. Travel. So we still don't have any real guidance from the CDC. They are recommending it be limited to non-essential travel only. My advice to you, not my legal advice, because I'm not allowed to give that out, but friend to friend, don't make your employees travel. Anyone who wants to travel, sure, no problem, but I wouldn't make anyone travel right now. Require business travel. You can encourage business travel, understand that there's some risk. Make sure everybody's got, PPP and the rest of it, PPE. Consider where the travel is to. If it's a state with no mask mandate or high levels of COVID, be more careful. And I mentioned those vaccine passports that I think they're coming. That might be, we talked before about, can we require vaccines? Well, it might be in the near future that you can't go on a business trip, you can't get on a plane without a vaccine passport. And so that's going to become an essential condition of some jobs. But you got to think about that and maybe revisit your job descriptions and see if you need to identify that vaccine passports or that being vaccinated or business travel is required as a part of the job in order to say, if you don't have the passport, you can't do this job. So this is a lot. Everybody needs to take a deep breath. A lot of this information that I've gone through, it's all out there. It's on the web. It's just hard to decipher and figure out how to apply it to your business. And between the pandemic, the economic roller coaster, the change in the administration, not to mention Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, anti-Asian violence, it is a lot to handle for business owners and HR professionals. So Hopefully you are getting some good guidance. If you need help, I'm trying not to make this a complete marketing event, but if you do need help, I'm always happy to pick up the phone and either talk in hypotheticals, or if you're ready to hire us, provide you with some real answers. We offer trainings on how to avoid problems. Again, I was chatting with Bill before this started. The bulk of my day is dealing with vaccine questions and doing investigations into allegations of inappropriate comments or behavior based on Me Too, Black Lives Matter, and anti-Asian violence. There's just a lot going on in local workplaces. People are getting more comfortable bringing up their concerns, and how you respond is just incredibly important, not just for legal liability, but also for morale in the workplace. So trainings, investigations, things like that. Shulman Rogers offers a lot of free resources. So if you are interested in getting on our alert list, we try to send out alerts. I think we have one going out today. Whenever we can, on changes in the law, feel free, just email me, and I'm happy to add you to our free alert list. You'll get some invites to webinars like this. But in addition, for paid legal services, we do try to offer some budget-friendly options for that as well. We have a la carte flat fee prices for some documents and some of our trainings. And then we offer a subscription service for people who think that they're going to need to regularly be in touch. They have a lot of questions. It's basically a way to pay for about 2 hours of legal work, but you're entitled to 5 a month. So for some businesses, that's very enticing, and it's a way to encourage you to not be worried about picking up the phone. It's kind of baked into your budget, and that's an expense that you're willing to take on. With all that, I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share. I'll put into the chat now, in case anybody is interested, my email address. And I really want to thank Bill for inviting me to give this presentation. I know everyone on the phone, hopefully you can take a little bit of a sigh of relief. And I know some people, you'll be watching this like I do at double speed to get through these presentations on the Zoom. It's just a lot. And I give my hats off to everyone who's having to deal with all of these pretty stressful situations, because we all start with how can we do the best that we can for our people. I think everybody that I'm working with is really coming from a place of, I really want to be as compassionate and helpful to my people, but we run a business. And so how do we also serve our clients and keep the business afloat? Because taking care of our people is also providing them income and making sure that the business stays in place. So from my perspective, hats off. There's a lot of stress and decisions on your plate, and if there is ever a way for me to be helpful, I'm always willing to give it my best shot.
Well, great, Mary. Thank you so much. There's a lot of material there. You presented it really well and organized, and that was helpful. I'm not an HR person, but I could follow it and understand it, and so I appreciate that. So. Let me throw this out to everybody who's on the call. Any questions? It's a small enough group that if you just like to speak up, that's fine.
Yeah. I answered everything. That's the sign of a great presentation.
I actually have a question. I have a quick question.
Sure.
So we do not offer individual offices, but our desks are 6 feet apart. And okay. If people do opt to come back, are we required to install what is the current recommendation with the plexiglass and all of that or some sort of divider between each workspace? Is that a requirement still?
It was never a requirement. There was no law that said you had to put up the plexiglass. What you are being basically judged on is what preventative measures, proactive measures have you taken. So if you're not able to put up plexiglass, what else have you done? Have you limited capacity? So maybe everybody's in a cubicle, but you have 50% of your people coming in instead of 100% of your people. Are you requiring masks? Are you do you have antibacterial throughout your building? What other measures? It's kind of a sliding scale. You don't necessarily have to, are you doing health screenings? Are, maybe you don't have the plexiglass up, but you're saying the only people who are in our office have been fully vaccinated. That's another way to limit the spread. So, you're never going to be able to do all of the CDC suggested preventative measures, but that's where I said, show your work. And by the way, anyone who wants a copy of the slides, just email me and I'm happy to do that. Email me if you want the slides, email me if you want to be added to the free alerts, all that stuff. But in the slides, I think I mentioned something like show your work, and really that's an allusion to, make sure you're documenting all the different things that you are doing to keep people safe. And it might be that you have someone who cannot or doesn't feel comfortable getting vaccinated. Maybe that person has plexiglass, right? So like there might be individualized solutions to your problems.
Okay. Last call. Any other questions?
Well, it was really great getting to know all of you. And like I said, hopefully this provides a little bit of, an opportunity for a deep breath. You don't have to do this perfect. You just have to kind of try to do the best that you can.
Yep. Well, Mary, thank you so much. This has been great. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody from the Kenwood community for participating. Hopefully you got some good material and information out of this. So thanks, everybody, and stay safe.
Bye.